Today, I would like to talk to you about the 1619 Project. If you have no idea what that is, I'll read you from an online site called educationnext.org. It says, quote, "The 1619 Project was and is sprawling and ambitious. It takes its name from the year of arrival in Virginia of a ship carrying African slaves. An introduction by the editor of the New York Times Magazine, Jack Silverstein, explained, quote, "The goal of the 1619 Project is to reframe American history by considering what it would have meant to regard 1619 as our nation's birth year. Doing so requires us to place the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the story we tell ourselves about who we are as a country." Now, this is an educationnext.org. So this is being introduced as a curriculum for schools to teach history this way. Now, if you don't think this is wrong, if you're old enough to know that this country was founded in 1776, this should scare you. So what they're trying to do is taking an actual fact, 1619, the first ship of slaves arrives into the continent. And then from then extrapolate and say that the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the way this country was founded, they don't have any meaning. We have to take this as the founding of America. That is to explain and prop up the narrative that this country is racist from the beginning. This is just unbelievable. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that created this nation in 1776. That was the year of the Declaration of Independence, and that is the most important document because the Constitution has no meaning without the Declaration. The Declaration is the foundational ideology, if you want, of this country. The Constitution is just a framework, a political framework to put in practice those ideals that are set off in the Declaration. And the first sentence, "We hold this truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal." That was put in the Declaration as the foundation of the creation of the nation. Of course, it's very easy today to judge people that lived 240 plus years ago with our standards of 2020 America. You can't do that. These people lived in a specific context and time in history where slavery was part of life. Let's talk about slavery for a second. This is an institution that is as old as human beings have been on this earth. It's nothing new. Slavery has been around in humanity forever, ever since we gained consciousness. And it was not specifically a racist institution because slavery happened mostly in the past between the same races. I mean, Europeans enslaved other Europeans. Asians enslaved other Asians. Native peoples in the American continent, before it was discovered, enslaved other native peoples. So Greece, Rome, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Most likely, if you were a slave, your slave owner looked like you. This phenomena of black and white and racism is very specific because at that point in history, when the colonies were formed, the British imported slaves from Africa to America, and they happened to have a different skin color. But that was not the case throughout the history of humanity. And by the way, slavery still exists today in 2020 in this world. That's for another video. So, when they created this country, the founders, of course, they lived in that era where slavery was a part of life. There was part of the economy of these colonies. And they wanted to unite 13 different colonies. And they knew they couldn't do it if they said, we're going to abolish slavery right now in 1776. They couldn't do it. So they came to compromises. But they knew not all the founders have had slaves. I mean, Adams didn't. I mean, the Quakers, the northern states. But yes, Jefferson had slaves. Washington had slaves. But from their own writings, you know that they did not like the institution. They thought it was wrong. It was a blemish and they said, we're going to pay for it at some point. And sure enough, 100 years later, thousands upon thousands of people died in the Civil War, which ended up in abolishing slavery. Then it took another 100 years for the South, with all the Jim Crow laws, and by the way, they're all Democrats, but that's another video. The KKK was founded by Democrats, but again, that's another video. It took until the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement to really get rid of all the systemic and institutional racism and the institution of slavery. So it's very disheartening to see that kids and teachers in schools are being given this kind of curriculum to teach. When we know, if you're old enough and you have a semblance of understanding of what the Declaration and the Constitution mean and why they were created, you know that they were not racist documents. And this is what they're teaching, that this country is founded on racism. And it's the opposite. The Declaration allowed Martin Luther King to have a speech, I Have a Dream, in 1963, where he stood on the shoulders of the Declaration of Independence and he said, I have a dream, in which he reaffirmed the principles and promises of the Declaration of Independence. He could do that because the founding of this country was based on the Declaration, which says all men are created equal. We never completely fulfilled that ideal, and we probably never will, because we are flawed human beings, but the ideal is there. And that's the beauty of this country. I don't know. It just blows my mind that we're allowing this to happen. They're filling our children's heads with crap, to use a fancy word. Please, if you're a parent, make sure that you know what they're teaching at the school to your kids. I mean, let me give you two examples. When they wrote the Constitution, there was a clause that said, this was 1787, I believe. They said, when they ratified the Constitution and became the law of the land, in the Constitution they put a clause that says by 1808, the traffic of slaves from Africa will be banned. So they put that, they couldn't do it right there, but they put it in there for a few years later to ban that. Another one that's very, very common, the 3/5 clause. And people say this is proof that the Constitution is racist because it considers black people as 3/5 of a person. That is so untrue and the opposite of what it is in reality. When they were discussing the Constitution and see how many representatives each colony, which became a state, will have in the federal Congress, It was based on the amount of population of each state. So the southern states, which on the one side of their mouth said black people are not people, really, are property, are things, chattel. On the other side of their mouth, they said, but wait a minute, when we have representatives, let's count the black people as individuals so that we have more representatives in Congress. The North said, no. You cannot count them as people because you don't consider them people, so you're not having extra representatives by counting them. They went back and forth, and they came up with a clever solution. The North, trying to be abolitionist and helping the cause of abolition, said, okay, instead of counting them as one person, we'll count them as 3/5 of a person. For the reason of reducing the amount of representatives that those states would have in Congress. So this was an anti-slavery clause. It's amazing that you can revert the significance of something like that. It's very easy. If you're not informed and somebody tells you, hey, the Constitution says that black people are 3/5 of a person. Isn't that racist? Yeah, of course. Please, wake up.